Hi, my name is Dr. George Shapiro. We're here at the AMMG in Miami, Florida, and I have the pleasure to interview Dr. Robert Hariri, a good friend, a good doctor, a great inventor, and a Navy pilot. Dr. Hariri.
George, it's good to be with you, and you're a great doctor, a great friend, and you're part of the reason why my interest in managing the degenerative diseases of aging has become such an important part of what I'm doing.
So, I know you've been involved with a lot of research for many years regarding placental stem cells. There's some new data coming out about its treatment in cancers. Can you talk about some of the benefits of your investigations and therapies?
So, George, I've been fascinated with the biology of the placenta for the last 20, 25 years. One of the observations we had a long time ago was that the placenta is not just a remarkable life support organ for the developing fetus, that it is nature's stem cell factory, which made it the ideal source material for the programs where we use placental cells in regenerative medicine. But we also recognize that the placenta had some remarkable immunobiologic properties. And what I mean by that is, first and foremost, it's nature's professional allograft, meaning it can be adapted to be received by any recipient without having to match it, and that's remarkable. But in addition, there were some remarkable anti-cancer and anti-infectious disease properties that are part of the reason why the newborn is protected from the transfer of malignancy from mother to a fetus, and also protected against infectious disease in the first few days after life, even though the adaptive immune system is still developing. So understanding the biology, we said, well, maybe there's a unique cell type within the placenta that could be identified, characterized, and productized to use in this emerging, growing field of immuno-oncology. And that cell type turned out to be a natural killer cell. And so now we use that natural killer cell to treat a number of liquid tumors, hematologic malignancies, and I'm very, very optimistic that this is going to find its way into treating solid tumors as well. So
what is the name of this company that you're referring to?
So Cellularity is the company that I founded and currently serve as the chief executive officer. Cellularity was spun out of Celgene. You probably remember that I led the cell therapy division at Celgene over the last 15 years, where following Celgene's acquisition of the company that I created 22 years ago, we built one of the largest portfolios of cellular-based therapeutics in the world. We advanced those treatments into autoimmune disease, certain degenerative diseases, and more recently in cancer. And Cellularity is now a leading company that has a platform technology around the placenta and operates in the broad clinical area from cancer to degenerative disease.
So, this conference is specializing on a whole track about exosomes. Exosomes are basically small nanoparticles that have cell-to-cell communication mechanisms, and they can transfer mRNA, DNA, different proteins, growth factors. What's your experience using exosomes, and how do you see exosomes starting in clinical offices where we can start using them now?
So there's a lot of excitement about exosomes because as we have gained greater and greater appreciation for how stem cells operate, we've begun to recognize that some of the biological properties of stem cells might in fact be conferred by the messages that they're sending out in a paracrine fashion to other cells. And so because cell therapy has certain complexity behind it, and because exosomes might fall in a very attractive regulatory landscape, there's been great attention at how to create a reliable, meaningful way to productize these tiny packages of biological information and then use them to exert the biological power of stem cells. Do I think that this is going to be an important part of the future of cellular medicine? Absolutely. Do I think it's going to operate in isolation or obsolete cell therapy, whole cells? No, I don't. I believe that they will wind up becoming part of an overall tool set that clinicians will use to treat patients with cancer, immune disease, degenerative disease, and so on.
So if you had the perfect company, it would be producing both stem cells, mainly from placenta, and exosomes.
I do have the perfect company, and in reality, it's absolutely true. So we produce whole cell therapeutic products. We produce exosome type products. We produce biological material products, all derived from the placenta. And it's my belief that there is you have to have a holistic approach to treating disease with regenerative and immunotherapeutic products. And we're fortunate because as a company that pioneered the use of the placenta, we have some of the most powerful experience around the supply chain, that is procuring the materials, the placenta at birth, managing it, managing the logistics of handling it, all of the information associated with it, and ultimately developing these into useful therapeutic products.
That's excellent. I gave a lecture at this conference on exosomes and the cardiovascular system, and you spoke right after me on stem cells, exosomes, regarding some of the autoimmune issues that we sometimes see, frailty issues as we're aging. Can you talk about stem cells, exosomes, and frailty and so on?
I'm convinced that the treatment of age-related frailty, which I believe is one of the greatest challenges in managing the aging population in the world, one of the most powerful tools is going to be cellular medicine. The reason being that work that I've done and work that's been confirmed by many other investigators has shown that as we age, the population of stem cells in our body responsible for renewing and remodeling us and maintaining functional repair and recovery processes after disease, injury, or aging becomes dysfunctional as a consequence of losing the quantity and quality of those stem cells. And so George, that for many years I have advocated that if you can replace or recharge that regenerative reservoir or regenerative engine, as I call it, you can maintain as healthy and youthful a form as possible. Now, there's a lot of work to be done to demonstrate in clinically validated models that you can positively impact an age-related degenerated tissue, like, for example, skeletal muscle. But once we show, for example, that administering stem cells from newborns, placenta, can restore healthy, lean muscle mass and treat a condition called sarcopenia, which is a very prevalent condition, you have a natural extension into treating age-related frailty. So, I often say the hallmark of healthy aging is maintaining high-performance mobility, high-performance cognition, and youthful aesthetics. And there's probably no better platform and technology to do that than placental stem cells.
Can you talk a little bit about your experience with CNS disorders, central nervous system disorders, stroke, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, with the use of stem cells and exosomes?
So, a lot of people have been exploring the possibility of using cellular medicine to address neurodegenerative diseases, neurologic dysfunction that occurs as a consequence of concussion or traumatic brain injury or stroke. And the data is very exciting, but because it's a complex disease and because the therapeutic is a highly complex pleiotropic effector, it's been very tough to show to a high level standard that cell therapy is the ideal approach to treating stroke or head injury or Parkinson's disease or whatnot. In our laboratory, we have plenty of data in various models that show that cell therapy has the potential to be very meaningful there. But I think we're going to have to find some indications where the clinical threshold for demonstrating efficacy is acceptable enough so that on the basis of strong safety and the ability to move the system towards normalcy. For example, in patients after stroke, showing that you can speed the rate of recovery after stroke, or that you can prolong the recovery period after stroke. So patients in rehabilitation can actually restore a much larger degree of neurologic function after injury. That's the kind of work needed to be done to get the clinical community, the clinical mainstream, to accept cell therapy as a way to treat those problems.
It's interesting. You and I both know some patients who recently had strokes after stem cell infusions or cellular therapy. They had a significant improvement in motor function, sensory function, resolution of damage on MRIs as well. So that's
it's exciting.
That's very exciting.
I mean, and Dr. Ian White today presented, and he showed some very interesting evidence that even acutely after treating patients with cell therapy, there were profound improvements in neurologic function. Now, he, I think, very, very aptly expressed that this most likely is the acute immunomodulatory activity of the cells, so that in any post-neurologic injury patient, there's always a background of inflammation which is affecting function. And his work and what he demonstrated is that this will manifest itself after cell therapy as a restoration of function that was very dramatic. In order to maximize the long-term outcome, you have to do that, and you have to support the recovery process. Again, perfect place for stem cells and for exosomes to work.
So there's a lot of activity out there with companies doing exosomes. My concern is some of the companies aren't going through their regulatory channels that they should. What's your take on safety and the FDA?
You know, the FDA's got a very tough job, right? They have this incredibly exciting, potentially transformational industry and field of technology using living cells as medicines, right? But first and foremost, the mandate is to protect the safety of the public and to ensure that those groups, whether it's academic or industry, that are using these therapies are doing so with the expectation of a level of safety and a level of activity that's meaningful in medicine. And, to be honest with you, cell therapy is not the same as a small molecule or a biologic agent. It's moving a much bigger mass of parameters rather than just addressing one biological factor or one biological pathway. The same cell therapy product put into two different patients may have very different biological activities because, as I often say, every stem cell thinks it's in a fetus. And so it's trying to drive the system back to that state of biology, which is very pro-regenerative and very anti-inflammatory. And so the FDA has a very, very tough mandate in front of it. I think they've done a very, very good job in evolving the guidances around cell and gene and exosome therapy. But over the next probably 12 to 24 months, you're going to see a lot more clarity on what the FDA expects. And I think first and foremost, it's going to be that the products meet a very high standard for quality, and that the treatment of patients is based upon clear evidence that the patient has a condition that would potentially benefit from those therapies.
That's a great answer. So I gave my lecture today on the cardiovascular system regarding cell therapy. Some of the new and exciting products out there are associating themselves with the exosomes, like drug delivery systems. Big Pharma may come in. Do you feel like some of these companies are going to come in and basically take over some of the products and things that are going on right now regarding therapeutic devices with exosomes, like, for instance, interventional cardiology using the new balloon pumps, new PTCA balloons with fenestrated holes in it that secrete drug-eluting molecules like sirolimus.
Right. So, here's the bottom line. There's no doubt that big pharma, as we know it, the major pharmaceutical companies, have a vested stake in advancing cell therapy. And you saw great evidence of this in immuno-oncology, the use of immunotherapy to treat cancer. The large pharmaceutical industry came in and sought relationships first as collaborative sponsors of research with companies that were making breakthroughs in treating patients with CAR T therapy, for example. And then once there's evidence that these treatments are moving to commercialization, Big Pharma comes in and buys up those companies, and it's a very positive thing for stakeholders who invest in those businesses. Do I believe that Big Pharma is going to be in this industry in a more meaningful, deep way in the future? Absolutely. And the truth of the matter is, companies, even like my company, Cellularity, we focus our attention on science and development. In order to build an organization that can be successful and leverage an approval around a breakthrough product, you need a very large, experienced commercial organization. It's not in the best interest of my stakeholders or in the best interest of most developmental stage companies to have to rebuild all of that commercial infrastructure. So the relationships with Big Pharma are going to be essential to long-term returns on those products. But the reality is that when you have a therapeutic breakthrough that affects a very large market size, some of these companies in the cellular medicine space may make a strategic decision to build their own commercial infrastructure.
So we spoke about cellular therapy, exosomes. Bob, how quickly do you think this therapy can make its way into the market regarding frailty?
So, George, that's a really, really good question, and I think both of us feel a responsibility to finding ways to help accelerate access, right? Patients who are facing frailty as a consequence of just normal aging, or accelerated frailty cachexia because they're combating diseases like cancer or immune disease or degenerative joint disease. These patients are suffering and could really benefit from the availability of any safe product that can restore some of that regenerative potential that used to exist in their bodies when they were younger. It's funny, but we often talk about the fact that youth is a time in our lives where we have very powerful regenerative potential, and part of the opportunity is to create a network of centers that work at the highest levels, that deploy these treatments perhaps under investigational applications or perhaps in jurisdictions where licensure is provided in a more receptive way. And I believe that cellular medicine will probably add quality to many people's lives as they age, but it has to be done responsibly, and most important to me, it has to be done in a way where the products are of the highest quality and they meet the current standards, the GMP standards the FDA prescribes, and that the patients are screened, evaluated, and entered into these treatment programs because they actually have a condition where these products have the probability of doing something. And then, most importantly, the data on how these patients respond to therapies has to be compiled and made available for review.
This has been a nice chat with Dr. Hariri, esteemed neurosurgeon, researcher, inventor regarding cell therapy and his company Cellularity.
George, always good to see you, and thanks for having me again.
Thank you.
Thanks.